Hi everyone, and welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. So everything about the last 2 weeks has just been complete and utter mess. Once again, this was one of those time chunks where I just really felt like I couldn't go too far from my phone because every 30 seconds there was something new. I'm recording this on Thursday, June 19th. Happy Juneteenth, everybody, at about 6 p.m. Eastern. So anything that happens between now and Monday is not my business. But hearing that date, you should know that the last 2 weeks were just a mess. And a lot of the stories that I have for this episode are a little bit heavy, I guess, is the best way to put it. Has been a pretty doom and gloom news cycle. But the other thing that I wanted to say off the top is that I will be following my original plan and I will be taking the last week of June off. So there will be no episode on June 30th. I really feel like I just need the time to step back and plan for what the rest of the summer holds. It's getting a little bit chaotic to keep up with everything. Again, not unmanageable, and not that anything is a burden, but I feel like I haven't had a minute to just catch my breath and really be able to put my all into coming up with some fantastic episodes. But I do have some really good episodes planned for the month of July, so I'm really looking forward to those. Anyways, enough about me. Let's get into who really matters. Donald Trump. Let's kick the episode off talking about Donald Trump's military parade. Backstory on this is Flag Day was this past Saturday on June, 14th, I think? Simultaneously, June 14th is Donald Trump's birthday. Simultaneously, to the third degree, it is this year the military's 250th birthday. Somehow, all of these things culminated on the same day, and it was also Donald Trump's birthday and the day of the military parade on Flag Day. Not to defend Donald Trump, but it was a little bit unfair of media to paint this as his military parade because it does seem like something that he didn't exactly have control over. This seems like something that was planned well beforehand. Anyways, the parade was kind of hot mess. There wasn't huge crowds or anything, which I found really interesting that nobody wanted to go and see this, because how many other times do you get to go see a tank? But I digress. I wasn't there. The parade featured historical uniforms and weapons and 6,000 troops, helicopters, and it kind of took over the National Mall, which was my favorite place to be at when I lived in DC, and I feel like it's been defiled. The other thing was that technology firms such as Oracle, Palantir, who has been in the news a lot recently, and Coinbase even took part as corporate sponsors for this, which it's the Easter egg roll and inviting private companies to do advertising there. It's just weird. These are long-standing American institutions, and I just don't feel like private companies should be able to stake their claim on events like this. The other thing was that crowds were not what Trump was expecting, and you know how he feels about crowd sizes. It's his soft spot. Reportedly, allegedly, Trump chastised Pentagon officials over the lack of people at his birthday party, saying he was expecting a more menacing display and kind of disparaged the execution of the parade. The parade wasn't shown on CNN or MSNBC. They had it small in the corner because all the stuff with Israel and Iran was going on. So to CNN and MSNBC, they were we'll take a pass. But Fox News did have it on, and they did have a good, they had a commentator on that was talking about the significance of the uniforms, which I thought was really interesting. Again, from the historical piece, it was pretty cool and interesting. You can go to one of the Smithsonians and probably get the same information, but whatever. But I also don't blame CNN and MSNBC for being no, thank you. There was plenty of other things going on in the world. Overall, though, critics are pointing to the fact that it reportedly cost between $25 to $45 million in taxpayer dollars, and questioned, of course, the purpose of the parade as a political stunt rather than a genuine tribute to our military. The other thing was that the troops, a lot of them were out of step, which a lot of people are saying, oh, that was their silent protest, da-da-da-da. That could very well be the case, but it was... There's so many videos out there of the North Korean military parades and the Chinese military parades, the Indian military parades, and they are showing the discipline of the army. So it's a little bit laughable to now put the American version next to those. We're certainly not winning a military in-step competition with that video. However, Trump's shitty birthday party quickly got even worse with the No Kings protests. Across the country, millions of people protested under the slogan "No Kings" to denounce what they saw as a presidential power grab. This was in direct reference to the military parade, but it is also so much bigger than that because, he's grabbing at power. It was organized by 5051. These protests spanned more than 2,000 cities and towns and had millions of participants, and it is estimated to be, I think, the second largest single-day demonstration in the United States. They were in places like New York, Los Angeles, who was kind of getting off the ICE protest, Chicago, and more. Or the rally signs were, a lot of the ones that we've seen before. Overall, the protests were peaceful, to say the least. There was a shooting at one of the protests in Utah, I think it was. Not from the police. From what I heard, it was just a crazy person, to say the least. And there were many police stations that tweeted and said, hey, thanks for keeping it peaceful. So there you go. You can have a peaceful protest with millions on millions of people. Trump, upon hearing about the protests, I think in the week leading up to them, it's hard to imagine that he hadn't heard that these were going to happen, but his response was like, anybody that plans on protesting and gets violent are going to face like very big force, which I think in turn drew up numbers that went to the protest. So I don't think it had the effect that he thought it was going to. So bottom line, it was funny to see the full protests and the not so full stands around the military parade. And in my opinion, was kind of a symbolic victory for civil resistance and protesting. The message of the protest was no kings, but there are so many things you could point to in this current administration that show Trump being king-like that I feel like that made the protests a little bit more effective. A lot of the signs were pointing to things like immigration, government surveillance, the other power grabs that he's done. And really, I felt like it was a bit of a reckoning of looking at one action about national pride and another about national conscience. There were some very heartwarming videos to come out of this. The one I saw that actually brought me to tears was a little boy at a protest, I think in California, and he's sitting on his dad's shoulders and he plays the national anthem on the trumpet. That one broke me. That one really broke me. Anyways, looking forward to the next one. Moving on. The G7 was this past week and weekend. Trump just up and left. He said, peace out, guys. Talk to you guys later. Talk to you never. This comes as reports were coming out that it was very contentious and people were not so happy with Trump, which, duh. Tell me something I don't know, media. No offense. So he left a full day early, and the reason given was Israel and Iran, which at this point, yes, I understand that was a huge story. Everybody's got their eyes on it. But at the point that he left, I'm pretty sure Iran was being we're going to bomb all the people that help Israel. And we were kind of hands up, that's not us. Trump leaving the G7 ultimately fueled the speculation and rumors that the US is going to do something big and get involved. Now, then, of course he did, he immediately got on Truth Social. And issued warnings urging people to evacuate Tehran. Okay, he expressed frustration at Iran's refusal to sign a revival nuclear deal, denouncing it as a waste of human life and reiterating his bottom line stance, no nuclear weapons for Iran. Now, it's time to talk about Barack Obama, okay? The Iran deal was not perfect, okay? What it boils down to, this was one of the last things that Obama did as president. Obama signed a deal with Iran that said, you stop making nuclear weapons and we will lift our sanctions on you. Iran said, sounds good. Donald Trump walked in and ripped up the Iran deal, said, it's a bad deal. Okay, fine. Now, Trump is trying to put in place, quite literally, the same exact deal Obama had in place. He ripped it up, I think, solely because it was Obama's deal, and now is trying to do the same thing again. But obviously, in the time that Trump ripped up the Iran deal to now, they've had close to 8 years to keep building and working on their nuclear weapons. They don't want to give that up now that they're getting close. And he wanted them to earnestly come to yes, I agree Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, but the solution to that was to keep the original Iran deal in place. At this point, the situation is quickly slipping through our fingers and almost out of our control. Anyways, after Trump left the G7, they deployed a bunch of boats over towards Iran, which is signs for something big. Trump also directly rebuked international efforts for a ceasefire, denying comments from Francis Macron about his mediation attempts. The early departure also pulled him from critical G7 talks on Ukraine and global trade. That's weird. Do you think he saw those talks and was I don't know, those ones are boring? Probably. Anyways, domestically, in terms of Iran and Israel, this has caused a fracture within the Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene is out there tweeting, real MAGAs don't want us to get involved, while as the war hawks are being drop the bombs. Democrats are screaming and waving their hands about rules per usual. Per usual, the Democrats are like, wait, guys, we can't go to war unless you tell Congress first. You mean to tell me that you think that standing up, waving your arms around and going, hold on, you need to follow this rule to the guy that for the last 5 months has not followed a single rule is going to make him do a double take and bring the bombs and the boats and whatever back? Like, okay. Nice reminder, I will say. I think some people forget that Congress needs to approve war, but I digress. Moving on, we are going to talk about the politically motivated shootings out of Minnesota this past weekend. On June 14th, 2025, a gunman posing as a police officer attacked 2 Minnesota Democratic lawmakers at their homes in the Twin Cities area. He also went to 2 other lawmakers' homes, but thankfully, both of those people were not home. State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were killed, while State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were shot and hospitalized. Additionally, Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark's dog was shot and had to be euthanized on Sunday due to its injuries. The suspect, 57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter, was later arrested after a days-long manhunt and faces federal charges for stalking, murder, and attempted murder. Officials revealed Bolter had compiled a hit list of Democratic politicians as well as abortion providers. Weirdly, flyers promoting No Kings were also found in his vehicle, though investigators have not determined a clear motive. That sentence annoys me because if you have a list of 70 people and they're all Democrats, what do you think the motive was? And you are a man that has like sermons out there crying about abortion. What was the motive? Like, I have 2 eyes. Pretty sure I can put 2 and 2 together. Anyways, authorities characterized the incident as a politically motivated assassination attempt, pushing national alarm about escalating violence against public officials. In the political aftermath, U.S. Senator Mike Lee posted on X blaming Marxists for the shootings and basically said something along the lines of, this is what happens when you don't give Marxists what they want. Saying, in essence, that the shooter was like a left-wing nut job and whatever. All this despite evidence that the shooter was conservative and pro-Trump. And this was like a common thing. Like, people were like, Melissa Hortman was the speaker and she had recently voted yes. She was the only Democrat to vote yes on a budget bill that stripped illegal migrants of like their right to healthcare in Minnesota. And so people were like, oh, like the Democrats took her out, da-da-da-da. I'm sorry, but like, she did what a good leader does. The Minnesota State House and Senate are almost evenly divided. And state budgets almost always get passed on like the last day of a session. If she hadn't voted for that, Minnesota would have been like budgetless. Like, she did what a leader does, I fear. You know, she might not have agreed with that like portion of the budget, but the way that right-wing media is framing it as like all it was a bill to strip migrants of healthcare is so dishonest. Like, they refuse to acknowledge rhetoric matters until some Democrat says something that's like a little bit too far, and then they're all over do you want him to get shot? Like, God, please. It's also hypocritical. Anyways, Lee deleted the post following backlash, including a direct confrontation from Minnesota Senator Tina Smith on the Senate floor. She spoke to the media and said that she spoke to Mike Lee. She wouldn't say what he said in response, but it seemed like amicable-ish, I guess is the best way to describe it. Additionally, Senator Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Schumer called for accountability, per usual. Security experts cautioned that threats to lawmakers have been rising steadily, with 9,500 recorded against federal members in 2024 alone. Now, I will say I am a big proponent of, call your senators, call your representatives, whatever it is. But I will also say that it's unproductive to call them and like be mean to them, because chances are the person you call, it's probably an intern or the voicemail, and who's listening to those voicemails, it's typically interns. So we're getting deep in the lore now. When I interned with Senator Durbin, it was at the same time that Ketanji Brown Jackson was going through her hearing for the Supreme Court. I don't know if you remember the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearing, but there was a whole bunch of right-wing fodder about her letting pedophiles go and, whatever. And the amount of calls we'd get in of people being like, you support, saying I literally can't even repeat it. I think I'd get my clean rating taken down. But the things that they would say are just insane. And I'm like Senator Durbin was just the leader of the Judiciary Committee. Like, what? it was the most bizarre thing. But it's doing stuff like this is like the same thing as online bullying. However, the people that are calling and directly threatening the lives for elected officials, there's clear evidence that there are some people that will go out and get the gun and actually follow through on the threats. And it's also a massive waste of resources for the people that are supposed to keep our elected officials safe when they have to go and investigate almost every call. In Minnesota specifically, state leaders are holding emergency meetings to consider new protective measures, such as removing home addresses from public records. And I think somebody re-sponsored a bill to do that same thing in the House, in Congress. You know, our elected representatives are supposed to listen to us. So I think there are a lot of people that would make the argument that we are also owed their address and where they live. I would disagree with that. At this point in time where there are so many people and demonstrable cases of people harming legislators, it is important to protect their addresses, you know, and there are also going to be people that say, well, move to a gated community, move to a townhouse with a security guard or whatever. Your job shouldn't force you to live in a certain circumstance, if that makes sense. And I'm already thinking of like the right-wing comments that are going to be like, well, I work at a factory, so I have to live by the factory. That's not what I mean. God, anyways. A GoFundMe for the Hortmans has raised over $90,000, and lawmakers echoed the family's call for kindness and unity in their memory. I think they're the ones that had 2 kids that basically released a statement and were like, you know, the best way to celebrate our parents' lives is to go forth and be kind. Moving on to other senators, Senator Alex Padilla was forcibly removed from a DHS briefing. During an immigration protest in LA, dog killer Kristi Noem showed up to save the day, I guess, and she did a press briefing at the local LA FBI field office. Senator Alex Padilla attempted to question officials, but was physically removed and briefly handcuffed by security. You can go look up the video if you would like to, but essentially what happens is Kristi Noem is giving her shtick. Alex Padilla says, like, I'm Senator Alex Padilla, and starts to ask a question. And gets immediately like tackled and detained. Kristi Noem, a couple hours later, gets on the news and is like, he didn't identify himself and he lunged at me. The first thing he says is, I'm Senator Alex Padilla. So Kristi and DHS just lied. Like, the video is there. The video is right there. And there were a lot of people being like, well, don't interrupt a press conference. No offense, but that's literally exactly what a press conference is. A press conference is a place for you to ask questions. So whatever. Padilla later delivered an emotional speech on the Senate floor describing the incident as shocking and unconstitutional. Noem defended the response as maintaining order. Democrats and civil liberties groups expressed alarm, obviously. And all of this in the wake of, you know, the LA protests, which I think everybody was following those. You know, they were peaceful until Trump sent in the National Guard. On the first day of the protests, I think it was LAPD had literally released a statement and was like, thank you guys for keeping it peaceful. Then what happens? Trump sends the National Guard. What happens the next day? Chaos. Wonder why. Generally, though, I think Alex Padilla is not the first nor the last elected official that is going to be detained. And it's happened over and over again. Alex Padilla's was just the most grotesque way of lying. The way Kristi Noem stood up there and went, he didn't identify himself and lunged at me. Okay. Liar. The whole, like, and also when Padilla came back to Congress, like right after this had happened, their C-SPAN was running, and an unidentified lawmaker, I don't think anybody stepped up to like claim that this was them, was heard yelling on the floor and being like, what do you think they're going to do to you? Like, this is ridiculous. And I think they're right. Like, this is just getting more and more insane. It's getting more and more scary for lawmakers to speak up. And it does, this is what authoritarian regimes do. They, you know, hammer down on the few people that speak up, and then in turn, it makes everybody else scared to speak up. So this is not new, but I do think that there are some definite fighters in Congress that are not gonna let that stop them. Moving on to, this one's not as like doom and gloom. Not as doom and gloom in like the imminent harm type of way, I guess, but unemployment is surging among recent graduates. If you are between the ages of like 21 to like 26, this is going to speak to you. A Wall Street Journal and Labor Department report revealed unemployment has soared among recent college grads. Right now, the unemployment rate is 5.8%, the highest in a decade outside the pandemic. By comparison, overall college graduate unemployment remains around 2.7%. So that's all college graduates. Entry-level job openings have dropped, specifically because of things like AI. I'm not going to lie, a lot of my job could probably be done with AI, but the human component is still needed. Nonetheless, experts are warning about long-term wage stagnation, mental health burdens, and possible skill mismatches. My biggest gripe with this is that, if AI is taking all these jobs and there's not enough of these entry-level jobs, what are you going to do when you need a manager and there's nobody with that entry-level experience that has gained the knowledge to become said manager? The problem with these lack of jobs is prevalent, especially in non-STEM fields. The crisis raises pressure on colleges and policymakers to retool programs and better align education and workforce needs. Graduates are seeking internships as stopgaps and also going to grad school, as I did. But systemic reform is absolutely needed. Many fear that this could signal a permanent shift in young adult employment prospects. I've talked a little bit about this in other episodes, but I got my undergraduate degree in sociology. I got one of those useless degrees. And I knew the minute I majored in it that I was going to have to go to grad school. So I did. I moved to DC. I went to grad school mostly because I tried to find a job a little bit after I graduated, but I kind of got to a point where the job market was still and I went to grad school. I finished grad school in DC. I had aspirations, I guess, of staying in DC, and I couldn't find a job. I moved home. I couldn't find a job for 9 months. I graduated in May and I didn't get a job until March. And I got a job in something that I was never planning to do. And like I said, my job could probably be done by AI. I am in a non-STEM field and the place I work does encourage the use of AI tools. So if I were to depart tomorrow, somebody could probably, add the things I do for work into their portfolio of things they're doing and probably accomplish most of it with AI. There needs to be some regulation on AI and how it's used in work, but also this seems so short-sighted. Like I said, what are they going to do when they need a manager for these companies and there's nobody with the experience to be a manager? But I say this whole news piece to say, keep your head up. A lot of my listeners fall into that, young to mid-20s age range, and it's tough. It's sad and it's scary, and we are a generation that is sicker and poorer than our parents ever were. And I know a lot of people that are stuck in jobs that they don't really like because they can't find something else. I know myself, who was job searching for 9 months before I could find something. And I know people that are going to grad school to try and stop the hemorrhaging. Anyways, I'm not one to give career advice, but I do think it is important to talk about these things to the people around you, because there are a lot of, especially adults, I'm an adult, a lot of older adults, boomers, older Gen X, that just don't really get it. They haven't looked for a job in so long, and when they've got their first jobs, it was just such a different world. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk about Trump and FEMA, because Trump wants to get rid of it. Trump announced plans to phase out FEMA after this hurricane season, transferring disaster relief responsibilities to states. Now, this is particularly funny because I don't know if you remember, but in the run-up to the 2024 election, there was big mudslides in North Carolina, and Trump was all over Truth Social and Twitter, and all his cronies were all over Twitter being like, Biden is telling FEMA not to help Republicans. Biden needs to give more money to FEMA. FEMA's all out of money. Da, da, da. Which then boosted Trump in the polls. Okay? Right. So for him to then turn around and be like, actually, we're just going to get rid of it completely. That is what you pooped on Biden for, rained on his parade for, was Biden apparently, allegedly not using FEMA to its full extent, and you just want to get rid of it. Okay, whatever. Experts warn that states are underfunded and ill-prepared for large-scale disasters, which that is literally the whole point of FEMA. You can't just expect Florida's constantly hit by hurricanes. If they don't have the budget to constantly be paying for hurricane damage repairs. Some states prepare small-scale recovery for minor disasters, but without federal coordination, large disasters may overwhelm regional capacities. What this is doing is so if a big coastal, say New Orleans got hit by a hurricane again, okay? And there was significant damage, without the help of FEMA, you're looking at years and years and years of recovery. In a big tourist area, you can't afford to have the years and years and years and years and years of recovery. Anyways, proponents that are heartened the dismantling of FEMA claim it decentralizes power and removes bureaucratic inefficiency. But skeptics, like myself, fear the outcome would disproportionately impact poorer regions. Oklahoma better not hope that they have a big old tornado. So now states are scrambling to develop capabilities for emergency contracting and logistics. Ultimately, this feels like another like grift in a way. Like he's totally got some buddies that are like in disaster cleanup spaces and are ready to pick up these state-funded contracts. Nonetheless, public confidence in response to natural disasters is already iffy, and this could make it even worse when the states are not able to handle it at the same way that the government was, no matter how inefficient it was at the federal government level. Moving on to my last story. Tucker Carlson is the hero of 2025 that we didn't know was coming. This one was absolutely not on my bingo card. But Tucker Carlson slams Fox News as being propaganda for elderly people. Tucker, I'm going to need you to whisper that in my dad's ear daily. Tucker Carlson publicly denounced his former network, Fox News, as a propaganda hose aimed at manipulating elderly viewers and pushing pro-war messaging on Iran. That's kind of what started the whole blowing his top off about it, was Iran. Carlson accused Fox, its owner Rupert Murdoch, and conservative voices like Sean Hannity of fueling military escalation. He contrasted that narrative with his own evolving stance against the Iran-Israel escalation. His remarks sparked debate about bias in mainstream media and the overlap between editorial opinion and also government policy. The move, going back to what I was first saying about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that if you want escalation, you're not MAGA, it reveals the rising fracture in conservative media and conservative politicians and just the conservative right-wing side in general. But it also has the implication to erode audience trust, which I would love that. The other thing that Tucker Carlson did was shame Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson had a little sit-down chit-chat. And Tucker Carlson was like, how many people live in Iran? And Ted Cruz was like, what? I don't know. And Tucker Carlson goes, you don't know the amount of people that live in a place that you want to topple? And Ted Cruz goes, okay, Tucker, so how many people do live in Iran? And Tucker goes, 93 million. Literally embarrassed him on camera and then posted it for everybody on the internet to see. So Tucker Carlson seems to be a voice of reason for this current moment. Still not a big fan of him, but he's doing things right now. He's doing things that I find funny, at the very least. Embarrassing Ted Cruz, I wish it was me. Tucker Carlson still sucks, but the more that they have conservative on conservative crime in terms of viral social media clips, the better it is for everybody, because people will see, their favorite politician, Ted Cruz, and their favorite TV personality, Tucker Carlson, beefing, and be like, oh my God, wait, whose side am I on? That's the type of thought crisis that you want people to have, to start being able to think critically and disseminate between what Tucker Carlson is saying and what Ted Cruz is saying. That's, even if you disagree with both of them, that's the benefit to this, is getting people to watch them and go, wait, I'm having a crisis. Who am I supposed to listen to? But we'll see what happens, because Tucker Carlson could very easily just revert back to being awful. That is all I have for this week. It was a pretty heavy week. I know I didn't get too far into the Israel and Iran stuff. It's still ongoing and evolving. So I didn't want to get too in the weeds on it, just because everything in this can change at the drop of a hat, as we've seen. Trump left the G7, but nothing's really changed since he left, so I'm not really sure why he left, except that he was uncomfortable that people were upset at him. But I'm keeping an eye on that, so hopefully when I do my next solo episode, I'll have a little bit more information on that to be able to give it a little bit more coverage, because it is incredibly important and history repeating itself for sure. But anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. Like I said at the top, we'll not be here next week. I need the week off. So 2 weeks from now, I will have a guest episode out. I believe it is an episode with a public school teacher. So we are back to the education topic. And yeah, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And then in 3 weeks, we'll do the whole solo thing again. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and no more military parades, please. Unless they're fun and better than this one. Ugh. I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.